It's always a pleasure to get out of DC and come visit with folks around the country. You know that MOAA's primary advocacy, okay, we have 10 registered lobbyists. We're up on Capitol Hill to protect our benefits. If we're going to maintain an all-volunteer force, we need to maintain pay and benefits. Otherwise, we need to go to a draft. And nobody really wants to go to that, although a lot of people have talked about it. The main things that we're doing, again, military compensation, fixing concurrent receipt. We got rid of the SPP DIC offset, protecting TRICARE fees, and then I'll get into a little bit more of this. But we've been voted one of the top lobbyists by the Hill magazine for 17 years in a row. So we're well respected on the Hill, and the folks that do that in our government relations team take pride in doing what they do. Just to give you an idea of the rest of MOAA headquarters or MOAA National, I work in a Armed Transition Center. There are basically 4 people in the Transition Center. There are 2 folks who do pay and benefits, talking to members via email, via phone calls, via doing webinars once or twice a month, writing our publications, writing articles for our magazine, and for our newsletter. Then the other 2 folks in the Transition Center help people in transition, whether it's their first transition from the military into the civilian community, or if they're transitioning inside, helping with resume reviews, LinkedIn profile reviews, interview prep, salary negotiation. We also, in our business unit, because we broke down from departments to business units when we reorganized in 2016, we have our council and chapters team who help with our councils and our chapters, headed up by Frank Michael, and we have a new deputy, Dina, just joined us. She's got a lot of chapter and council experience. We also have we have a technical person, Taylor, and then we also have Suzanne, who's our event planner. So that's the Transition Center, or the member chapter support team, besides the member service center. I forgot them. The member service center, who was the other interface with our membership. We have a communications team, which does all of our social media, our website, and our magazine, our monthly magazine. We have our IT team, which helps support the communications team. And then we have our foundation. Our foundation and our scholarship team. So we have 2 charities. MOAA is a nonprofit, but these are C3s. These are our true nonprofits. So we have the foundation, which allows me to come out and do things like this. And then we have our scholarship fund. Scholarship fund, typically 80% of it is interest-free loans, okay? And then if the student is doing well in their junior or senior year, instead of it being an interest-free loan, it's a grant. So about 20% of them are grants. The applications are open for next year's, the 2024-2025 school year. So it closes at the end of this month. So if you know anybody who's currently serving or has served, any of their children need them. Federal loan goes at about 7% interest rate. So these are interest-free.
Just children, not grandchildren?
Not grandchildren, unfortunately. We've been asked that, but there are enough children of those who are currently serving or served. And we don't get enough enlisted children. So every time, this is an officer group, but every time I go out to Fort Belvoir or any other places when I do RAGs, I talk about that we want to see more enlisted children apply for these loans. Thank you. Truly appreciate you keep interconnected with groups like this. And we emphasize that it's not just the member, but the family who lives in military life. So it's important to thank you. We belong to the Military Coalition, 35 organizations, most 360,000 members, so we bring a fairly big voice. We're the 4th largest MSO, VSO, military service organization, veteran service organization. But when we come together through the Military Coalition, it's 5.5 million. Not as big as AARP's 30-some-odd 9 million, but it's still a pretty big voice. We used to be organized in co-presidents. We went away from, and we were the permanent co-president. we decided that there would be a permanent vice president, and then they would alternate the presidency of this amongst other organizations. So the other three shift every 2 years, but we're going to be a permanent vice president. Big picture. Why is it tough to get anything done on Capitol Hill? Well, you can see here, back in the mid-60s, discretionary spending was 70% of the budget. You wanted to do something, you did it. You took money from the discretionary fund, and you did what you needed to do with it. Nowadays, it's reversed. So everything is mandatory spending. So that discretionary spending, if you want to do something new, you got to pay for it. And you hear how are you going to pay for it? What's the pay for? What is that mandatory spending? Social Security, Medicare, and the interest on our debt. The interest on our debt is increasing since our deficit is pretty large. But so here's the discretionary budget. So you can see DOD takes up over 50%. Okay. For this year, went up to $874 billion. That was less than a 2% increase. And then VAs went up to $325. That hasn't been decided yet, but that's a proposed 5.4% increase. So VA is a fairly large, other than the DOD. What are we facing? Well, we spent trillions of dollars for the virus and getting the economy back to speed. Deficit and debt is always a big topic up on Capitol Hill. Inflation, although it's come down a little bit, we had two of the largest in 21 and 22, 5.9 and 8.7%, only 3.2% for 2024. Crime, as you know, is an issue, especially in some of the bigger cities, police reforms and social unrest. For DOD, we're expecting flat budgets. I showed you here, only went up 2% for 2024. So we are expecting those flat budgets will cause quite some tough prioritization in the future. We're pivoting from the contingency operations of the global war on terrorism to now looking back again at Russia and China as near-peer conventional threats. Plans to cut to the military health system, thankfully, were put to a stop and put on hold for 5 years in last year's NDAA. Congress is looking to reduce entitlement costs. You've read it if you've been reading any of the Military Times magazines, sexual assaults and privatized housing scandals, and then suicide rates moving in the wrong direction, even though we're spending a lot of effort in that regard. And then each year for the last 27 years, we have not been able to pass a budget before the start of the new fiscal year. Military experience in our congressional representatives we think is important. But you can see in the last 20 some odd years, or actually 40 some odd years, how much it's gone down. It's leveled off in the last 10, 15 years, but still only 18%. Now, most of that 18% are on things like the Armed Services Committees or on the Veteran Services Committees, and they'll have staffers who have military experience. But it's important to educate the rest of Congress, senators and representatives, and that's why MOAA is up on Capitol Hill, making sure that they understand why it's so important. For those who are still in TRICARE, not on Medicare, TRICARE Select, TRICARE for Life. If you're in TRICARE Prime or TRICARE Select, the maximum out-of-pocket cost is $3,000 for Prime, and this year $4,157 for Select. Just in our civilian counterparts, the average in 2023 for an employer-provided family health care plan was over $6,500. That was just the premium, okay? That's $550 a month. And for us on TRICARE, Prime or Select, typically the maximum, besides the maximum out of pocket, but the maximum if you're fairly healthy, is going to be anywhere after your enrollment fee in the $1,000 to $2,000 range. So, apples to oranges though. People come into service for a number of reasons. They want to serve, maybe a family tradition. They want the education benefit. The post-9/11 GI Bill is a great benefit. They want to learn a skill. And then they also come in for we still have a pretty good healthcare program, even though I'm going to talk about how it's eroded, but it's still a pretty good system. So our representatives know how much our civilian counterparts are paying for their healthcare insurance. So it's important that we're telling them, if you want to maintain an all-volunteer force, you got to protect that benefit. That's the point. Okay, if I had here the 1990s, you would have seen a chart that goes like this. We took a big peace dividend in the 90s. The wall came down. I was near the end of my first tour. This is 1988. We had a brand new pilot, just got his wings. We used to say that it cost the Navy $1 million to train somebody to get their wings. He was with us for about 3 months. Here's a pink slip. Okay? Here's a pink slip. Go fly for the Delta. So after 9/11, it was easy to fix a lot of things. Okay? We got TRICARE for Life. We celebrated that 2 years ago. We celebrated 20 years. We got basic allowance for housing back up to 100%. Fixed end strength. Got concurrent receipt. Got pay raises, and I'll show you a little bit more of that here in a couple of slides. Here's a slide that a lot of folks don't like when we break it out. Especially when DoD says, hey, we're spending way too much money. But as a percentage of the overall budget, we paid the same for 50 years. The percentage of the DoD's budget for personnel costs, the blue, and for healthcare costs, the green, has stayed at a steady percentage of the overall budget. Okay? So, this spike, that's where I was telling you the pink slips were going out. Here in 2003, when the green spiked, that was when TRICARE for Life came on board. Okay? So, when DoD says we're paying too much for things, we break out this slide and they shut up.
All the personnel costs include pay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Each new Congress, and we tweak it in the second year, but each new Congress, we come up with our priorities. So these were the priorities for the 118th Congress, which came into on January of last year. So, compensation and service earned benefits. I know many of you might not be able to read all these. I'm not going to read every little bit. I'll send the slides to Jim if Jim wants to pass them along. But we're in a war for talent, okay? You might hear all the services are having issues with getting enough recruits, okay? The Navy just basically said, you don't have to have a high school diploma anymore. They're also looking at saying, if you admit that you used marijuana before you came in, they're giving some excuses. Some allow some to enlist. That's how much it's an issue to be able to get enough recruits. Every year, in the 18 to 22-year-old in the country, there's about 4 million men and women. Of that 4 million, it breaks down to those who want to serve, those who are eligible to serve, and then who are qualified to serve. It gets down to about 400,000, okay? Of that 400,000, every year, we would need to have 200,000 of that 400,000 just to meet recruiting goals. So we're fighting with everybody else, that war for talent, of that 400,000, okay? So stiff competition to get the 200,000 that we need. So we think the actions are to make sure pay comes in at the ECI, which we'll talk about on the next slide, and ensure all allowances and programs necessary to recruit and retain a quality force. We want to ensure pay continues for all 8 services during a government shutdown. There is something in place for the armed services for that now. And then provide concurrent receipt for military retired pay from DoD and disability pay from the VA. Okay, remember I told you, you have to go back a couple of years, but we were at one point, 13.5% behind. Military pay is supposed to go up by the Employment Cost Index. Retired pay, Social Security, all that goes up by COLA each year, cost of living adjustment. Military pay is supposed to be based on what civilian employees get every year. So that's the Employment Cost Index. So by 1999, we were 13.5% behind. After 9/11, it was easy to say, hey, we need to get back up on step, okay? So finally, by 2011, we had gotten it back up on step. Kept it that way for two more years, and then we went back for 3 consecutive years, until finally we're behind 2.6%. We've been able to convince Congress to at least give us the ECI since 2017, so it's stayed the same, and it's been approved for a 5.2%. So you got a 3.2% increase this year. The active duty got 5.2. So we get asked a lot, well, hey, they're getting more than us. Well, some years, like 2 years ago, you got an 8.7. The military got a 3.4. Yeah. So it's apples to oranges, okay, in that regard. Okay, military housing. The Budget Control Act of 2012 basically said we're going to look to save some money in certain areas, and they said over a 5-year period from 2015 to 2019, we're going to short BAH by 1% a year. So by 2019, they're 5% behind. Okay, so everything now is, all the new BAH rates are based on 95%. Well, we would like to see it go back up to 100%, because that 5%, especially during these inflationary years, has anywhere from $100 to $184 coming out of their pockets every year that they should be compensated for. So we want to restore BAH to 100%, ensure barracks are safe and healthy places to live, and there are codified procedures and authorities to increase out-of-cycle housing allowances when things like COVID happen. Healthcare for currently serving. We think the military health system is at risk, especially with the proposed cuts from a number of years ago. TRICARE beneficiaries are paying more for prescription drugs, while the value of the TRICARE pharmacy program is slashed by up to 25%. Where did that impact? Mostly rural areas. So people who had family pharmacists for generations, those pharmacists basically said with the new pricing structure that Express Scripts rolled out, that those pharmacists said, we can't make any money, we can't make a living being in this program. So a lot of them dropped out. So our federal civilian counterparts, we used to be on par. They had about the same level of pharmacy access that we have. Now we're 25% below where they are. Military health system reforms directed by Congress have resulted in higher fees and co-pays, particularly for working age retirees. Yet TRICARE policies have failed to keep up with evolving policies, technologies, and treatment protocols. We'd like to see them get back up to speed. The direct care system of military hospitals and clinics has undergone massive reorganization, accompanied by changing policies at the MTF level and capacity reductions. Where have we seen this? I live in, there's plenty of places in DC to go to. I'm at the Fort Myer Raider Clinic. I've been there for the last almost 9 years. I've had the same military contract doctor. I'm pretty happy with my care. Malcolm Grow Hospital, the Andrews Air Force Base Hospital, when I was in DC on my first tour before I came back in retirement, they had just gone under a major renovation to a big hospital on Andrews. About 5 years after they did this major renovation, they basically said, we only have the capacity now to service the active duty folks on base. So no retirees have access to this brand new hospital, fairly new still hospital. Some more actions. We want to reverse cuts to the pharmacy benefit and establish policy guardrails to ensure access to prescription medications and limits on copay increases. We want to fix the TRICARE young adult parity issue. The Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, allowed children of those with an employer-provided family health care plan to allow those children coming out of college who may get a job, but get a job with no employer-provided health care plan. They can stay under the father or mother's health care plan until age 26. TRICARE Young Adult TRICARE was exempted from that. And that's when TRICARE Young Adult came about. It is incredibly expensive. Okay, for the TRICARE Young Adult Prime, I don't know why anybody would want to do this. Those plans have to pay for themselves. So TRICARE Young Adult Prime is $647 a month for an individual, a child. TRICARE Young Adult Select is $311 this year, still very expensive. We want to require DoD to establish a transparent and well-published problem reporting system for beneficiaries experiencing NTF access problems. One other point that happened. I go up there every year to do a RAD up at Subbase in London, Connecticut. Okay, their clinic or hospital basically said we don't have enough pediatricians to handle the children of those that are serving on this active duty service members serving on this base. You don't have enough pediatricians. You're going to have to all go out in town. Well, then they had to reverse themselves because they didn't do the research to find there weren't enough pediatricians in that small little town of New London to service the children on the base. Okay. Healthcare for veterans and benefits for veterans. We passed the PACT Act. I'll get into that a little bit later. Now comes the hard part of making sure it works as Congress intended. Veterans rely on long-term care and home and community-based care services for everything from occasional help around the house to around-the-clock assistance. VA delivers 14 different types of long-term care programs in both institutional and non-institutional settings. Purchasing or providing care is placing increased demand on the department's healthcare system. This is a way for veterans to get that long-term care, because we know Medicare, and TRICARE for Life, and TRICARE don't cover long-term care, and buying long-term care insurance is extremely expensive, especially after your 60s. VA designated 2023 as the year of the caregiver, with plans to focus on continuing to implement and expand the caregiver support. There was a number of issues with that when it first came out. VHA, Veterans Health Administration, was supposed to make the determination of whether the veteran needed a caregiver, needed somebody with daily care, and they weren't administering it the same throughout the country. So we had one of our cover stories was this family. The veteran was a former Navy nurse, got injured in Iraq. Her husband basically left his job to become a full-time caregiver. They were told that they were in the program, and then a year into it, after they changed their lives, they were told, no, she can do enough stuff, but she's not eligible to have a caregiver. They reevaluated the system, and I believe they're still in the program, thankfully. A strong VA workforce and facility infrastructure are critical components to VA's long-term success. The aging infrastructure and high level of vacancies, at one point there were 40,000 vacancies throughout VA, and success like the PACT Act, how are they implemented? Well, VBA, if you've heard about the claim backlog, they've doubled their capacity, but the PACT Act has put so many new claims in the system that even though they've doubled their capacity, at one point they were doing 11,000 claims a day. But when you have 15,000 coming in, we think that's going to dwindle here, that everybody's getting their PACT Act claim in, so it should go down. But they've hired over 10,000 new rating officials to handle the influx of PACT Act. So we believe they were on the ball for that. Some of the actions: monitor recent legislation such as the PACT Act in areas healthcare, compensation, and follow-on support for surviving spouses and families, and compel Congress and VA to accelerate caregiving and whole healthcare services and modernization of VHA workforce and facility infrastructure. That's where most of the vacancies, that 40,000 vacancies, most of it is in VHA. Getting doctors and nurses to want to come and be federal civilians. For service families, spouses struggle with employment across the board and are constantly fighting to find and maintain employment through PCS moves. Spouse underemployment continues to negatively impact military families. Ensuring companies define work as both remote and portable is necessary to allow military spouses. One of our lobbyists, Jen Goodale, focuses strictly on family health care issues. Lack of accessible, affordable child care compounds this issue. In 2020, DoD reported nearly 9,000 military children were on waiting lists for health care, child care. DoD instituted a unique program, the In-Home Child Care Fee Assistance Program. There were 250 spots available, but because of lack of understanding, just 23 families used it, unfortunately. So, our actions were to improve congressional support for uniformed service families, enhance programs to support spouse employment, and ensure implementation of an effective basic needs allowance, which is for families that are in trouble, especially during COVID, provide this extra needs allowance to help them get by. And then to provide accessible, affordable child care options. Overcoming the lack of effective problem-solving mechanisms and resolution systems in the military healthcare system. For survivors, when a retired service member passes, DFAS recoups their last month of retirement pay. This is frequently a terrible surprise for a new survivor. If the death is reported by the 20th day of the month, you get paid at the end of the month for that previous month. DFAS has told me that if you report the death by the 20th of the month, that gives them enough time to shut off the payment and not have to recoup it. But if it's reported afterwards, you're going to get paid on the 1st, and then they're going to recoup it, and maybe halfway through the month. So you may have spent some of that money already. But they're going to look to recoup it. They're going to do an audit, and then they're going to send you the arrears of pay. What you're paid for the up to midnight of the day that the veteran passed. SGI and VGI have not kept up with inflation. It was recently increased to $500,000. It should have gone up to $600,000 though by our estimates, but $500,000 is the new limit. DIC has fallen behind other levels of survivor programming. 43% of the compensation of 100% disabled veterans. So this is a push. Basically, they want DIC, which is sort of the VA's version of SBP. If the veteran passed from a service-connected condition or is rated 100% permanently and totally disabled for the last 10 years of his or her life, they're entitled to dependency and indemnity compensation. It's just over $1,600. A veteran with a spouse at 100% is about $3,800 a month. So 55% of $3,800 is more than $1,600. So the idea was those that are 80, 90, 100%, that their DIC should be based on 55% of what they were getting on the month that they passed. Then repeal recoupment of last month's, continue to improve SGI and VGI, and then improve the baseline DIC. Regarding reserve component is also facing a recruiting crisis, and our nation relies on these service members, to respond to disasters at home and remain in the rotation to deploy worldwide. We must sustain their readiness and medical care. They also wait excessively long for their first paychecks as retirees at age 60. And then if it's delayed, they do not get TRICARE until they are in the system as retired. And if it takes 6 months, they've lost 6 months of health care. So, overcome the lack of TRICARE coverage for reserve components, maintain readiness, overcome delayed pay for Guard reserve members when they are promoted or when they retire, and then continue to support Guard reserve leaders in advanced legislative policies. Okay, our advocacy and action, we can no longer call it storming the hill, obviously. So, every spring, we bring in members from our councils and chapters with the support of national headquarters staff and board to try to go and touch base with every 435 representative and 100 senators and their staffs. Some representatives will meet with us. A lot of times it's just part of their staff. And we bring usually 2 to 3 issues. 2 to 3 issues that we want to focus on. We give them a whole packet of the things that I've done here. They get that whole packet. But it's to focus on the things that, if we can get anything done, here's the 2 to 3 things that we want to get done. So it's all based on supporting the all-volunteer force. The Major Richard Starr Act, which I'll talk about next slide. BHA Restoration Act, getting back up to 100% for BAH. And then protecting TRICARE for life. Every new Congress asks the Congressional Budget Office, how can we save money? And they open their drawer, actually they go into their computer, and they pull out things that they've said for, since I've been doing this for 9 years. Increase TRICARE fees. Institute a TRICARE for Life enrollment fee, which would be up to 2% of your retired pay. So think of what your retired pay is, and if you had to pay 2% of that retired pay as an enrollment fee for TRICARE for Life, which is currently free. Eliminate concurrent receipts. How many folks here are getting CRDP? CRDP? Concurrent retirement and disability pay? Okay. So think of eliminating that. So now you're gonna have the VA waiver, whatever you're getting from the VA taken off your retired pay. And then NIU, individual unemployability for members who are 70% or higher. If their disabilities don't allow them to get gainful employment, they can apply for individual employability. That allows them to get paid by the VA at 100%. Even though their rating is less than 100%, they get it at 100%, which about, if they have a spouse, a little over $40,000 a year. Think of where you're living, Texas. Can you live on $40,000 a year? Tax-free, you can make it work. Plus if you have Social Security. But if they want to take it away at 65, the argument that we made is veterans who are coming out of service and are rated 70% or higher and can't get a job. Therefore, they can't put money into an IRA. They can't put money into a 401k. So denying them that access to those retirement funds, because you have to have earned income to put money into an IRA and a 401k, and now you're going to take away their individual unemployability. So fight that. We haven't mentioned, so we got Protect TRICARE for Life, because this was the first time in about 5 years that we heard some serious rumblings that they're going to take that up again. Okay, so that's why we put it on our priority list. Let's see, and then means test. This was one of the most egregious ones. They were going to means test your VA disability. So, if you're making a good living and you're rated 50%, which disability compensation is to compensate you for the injuries or diseases you develop while you're serving. Now, if you make above $150,000, we're going to take that away from you. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And again, we remain with the military coalition to be steadfast fighting against these absurd proposals. Okay, concurrent receipt, concurrent retirement disability pay, and combat-related special compensation all came about in the 2004 timeframe. CRSC was complete right away. They made a couple of tweaks to it, but CRDP was phased in over 10 years. So this year January 1st of this year was 10 years of having full disability, full concurrent receipt of concurrent retirement disability pay. Talk about the way it works. Start in the middle. If you are rated 50% or higher, and you have 20 years or more of service, you are eligible for CRDP. You don't have the VA waiver applied. When you apply for VA disability compensation, there's a box on the 526EZ that says, I agree to waive retired pay in order to get tax-free VA disability compensation. So, if you meet these two, you don't have the VA waiver. If you have less than a 50% rating or less than 20 years of service, then you have the VA waiver applied. I'm in this group. I'm greater than 20 years, but I'm 40% or less. So therefore, I have the VA waiver applied to my taxable retired pay, but I get that amount from the VA tax-free. If you have combat disabilities, the way it works is whatever you have from the VA rating, apply to your VA waiver, apply to retired pay, you get your full VA compensation, but then you get a tax-free CRSC check based on the combat rating that your service says you have. Okay? So, you get your VA disability rating, you apply to your service for combat-related special compensation. So, your service looks at your disability and says, that one's combat-related, that one's not, that one's combat-related, that one's not. And then they add up that rating, the same way that the VA adds up all your individual ratings to come up with your total VA rating. Your service comes up with your total combat rating. The general rule, when you're eligible for both, the general rule is if the VA and combat rating are the same, then CRS, because if you're eligible for both, you can either get this one or this one. If you're eligible for both and the combat rating is the same, then CRSC is going to be most beneficial. Why? Because you have the exact same amount coming off your taxable retired pay coming back to you in the form of a CRSC check. A non-taxable CRSC check. So, when there's a split between the two, then you have to run your numbers to see, does it make better sense to have CRSC or CRDP? Now, where it becomes hard for these calculations is for reserve retirees or medical retirees. Currently, those who have combat ratings and were medically retired prior to 20 years are only eligible for CRSC. If we get the Richard Starr Act passed, I'm going to go through the history here. So, the idea behind concurrent receipt was eventually to get it for everybody who's eligible. We compromised in the mid-2000s to get those most disabled, 50% or higher, and 20-year retirees. So, we've come up with a strategy that we've got to take in small increments. Back in 18 and 19, we tried to get it all Chapter 61. We thought there were about 200,000, Chapter 61, 190,000 enlisted, and we said, hey, we're trying to get this mainly for the 190,000. That was too large. So, for the last 3 years, we've been looking to get it for the combat injured members who were retired, medically retired less than 20 years. About 53,000, about the same number as the widow's tax. Widow's tax was about 63,000. We think this is cheaper, but it's right now that we have 371 representatives in support. 371 out of 435, and I think it's 71 out of 100 senators. But they won't put it into the NDAA or pass it as a separate bill because we can't get the CBO to give an accurate accounting of how much it will cost. And they're not willing to go forward until they have a better idea of what it will cost. Mark Walensky and I have been trying to get the CBO to acknowledge that the folks that can only use this, getting them this, whichever, because we're not trying to do away with one. We're trying to get more money in their pocket. So think of a combat injured vet who's only eligible for this. They're 100% by the VA, but only 50% combat related. So they're having $3,800 taken on here and only getting back $1,200 or so here. Okay? Whereas if they kept their full retired pay and got their VA $3,800, they might be in better shape. And this is typically anybody with 15 or more years and 10 or more years of service. Okay? So that's the idea behind the Richard Starr Act, is to give them the opportunity to see which one puts more money in their pocket. And that's the intent. Okay, DIC, SPP DIC offset is no more as of 2023, so a full year. Again, eligible for dependency and indemnity compensation for an active duty death. Veteran passes from a service-connected disability, and it needs to be stated so on the death certificate. And then, or if the veteran's been rated 100% permanently and totally disabled for the last 10 or more years of their life, his or her life. People ask what's permanent and total. The VA determines that static disabilities that add up to 100%, they're going to say is permanent and total. There are a lot of diseases or things that get you at 100%, but are temporary. A joint replacement, okay? Prostate cancer. Those are given, if they're service-connected, are given at 100% for certain periods of time. Typically, for 1 year, for a cancer, it's 1 year after you go into remission or complete treatment. For a joint replacement, it's typically 6 months. 6 months. I think they reduced it to 6 months. I'd have to check that. But typically, you're 100% for a joint replacement until you've completed your rehab. And then they look at the residual issues associated with that. You can see 16, 12, 74 for this year. Those are COLA protected as well. Children are eligible, but it's typically mainly spouse. Okay, the PACT Act, which is the Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act, signed in 2022 by President Biden. It's mainly for burn pits exposure, asthma, rhinitis, and sinusitis, but it added these: head, neck, respiratory, and I won't list all of them there, but it also added radiation from World War II and post-World War II, and added new areas for Agent Orange exposure. The Secretary, at his discretion, can add new ones. We're understanding that he is looking at a couple of new ones for both Camp Lejeune and the PACT Act. Again, I said it expanded Agent Orange. Again, the majority of the impactors are listed service members. The new Agent Orange diseases, hypothyroidism, bladder cancer, and Parkinsonisms. They're going to add hypertension, but it's only until 2026. It's only for those terminally ill, homeless, under extreme hardship, or over 85. I get people, okay, the Blue Water Navy now for submariners that took an extra time to go through the top secret or secret deck logs to get those included. I get a lot of veterans who say, why should I bother putting in for hypertension? Because if medication keeps it under control, they service connect, but at 0%. So what good does it do me? Well, what does hypertension do? Hypertension affects your heart, typically. And so if you're service connected for a disease that is contributory to another disease, so say you have a heart attack, or have heart disease based on your hypothyroidism, that could end up being something that service connects you and may make your spouse eligible for DIC. So it's important to get it if you have it and were exposed either to Agent Orange. It's important, or you had it when you were serving. It's important to get it service connected. Arlington National Cemetery. The Department of the Army who maintains Arlington was told to extend the life of the cemetery out 150 years. So they came back with a proposal that basically restricts most retirees from eligibility for internment, burial at Arlington National Cemetery, and almost certainly restricts any female veterans. So they're midway through the conversion of the old Navy Annex up by the Air Force Memorial. That extends about another 40 years. So basically there's so much upheaval, the Army is not going to put this, we don't think the Army is going to put this in place. But there is a proposal for finding the next national cemetery. So we recommend everybody support HR 1413, expanding America's National Cemetery. This will allow them not to be able to put in these restrictions and allow until Arlington is filled up. We think the most likely place is going to be Quantico's Cemetery. They already have stables so that the Army would be able to provide the caissons and the honors equivalent to what's at Arlington National Cemetery. But there's also a push to maybe do it somewhere in the middle of the country, maybe Colorado Springs, or maybe somewhere on the West Coast. But we think Quantico is if I was a betting person, I'd say probably Quantico has a good chance of being the next national cemetery. So while the proposed changes are out there have been no changes. Everybody who was previously eligible is still eligible for internment, burial. Okay, if you want to find out how what MOAA is doing, what we're trying to support, we go to our Legislative Action Center. I know this is hard to read. Key advocacy issues, logging your interactions. We like to track when any of our chapter members are interacting with their representatives. And you don't have to be a chapter member too, anybody who has access. You don't have to be a member to get on this. And then MOAA supported legislation, and then finding your elected officials. So we've broken it down. You can focus in as retirees, as survivors, any family issues, break it down a little bit further. And then what I did is, this is MOAA supported legislation, and I tried to blow it up a little bit here. So this is the Major Richard Starr Act. You can see here, 326, I don't remember what I said, it's 326, not 371, sorry. 326 and a 435. The GUARD Act is to do away with the predatory claims, people that are charging veterans, and they're not accredited, but they're charging veterans 20% or more of their first years of disability, and some of them are fraudulent. So you can track all of these. And we end with COLA, so you can track last year's COLA with this year's COLA. Every middle of the month, between the 12th and the 14th, 15th of the month, they give us an update. So in a couple of days, you'll see January's, but you can see we're minus 2%. So if this was the end of the fiscal year, we wouldn't get a COLA raise based on it that it's negative. So, and you can see 3.2% last year. That's our legislative update. happy to take questions. It's a lot in a few minutes. So it wasn't that short. Yes, sir.
So, Paul, question I really wanted to ask was, so I retired, came out of active duty 25 years ago. Now I'm retired about 3 years. What would you, and one of the things I didn't realize was to take back of your pay, your 1 month pay when you die. I'm thinking, well, she's a seven that can make her at SPP, but, so that was a good thing. But what would you recommend? Is there any kind of a tune-up or look at, okay, here I am, I'm going on 70, I've been 22 years out. What kind of tune-up should I do? Any place to go on the website or call to find out what could I be missing or not thinking about?
Once a year, I do a Prepare Your Survivors webinar. Myself and my colleague Lila. We are in the process of updating we're combining a number of publications into one publication. Right now we have a survivors checklist, which, here's who you need to contact after the veteran passes. We're combining that with the Prepare Your Spouse or your family. So we do this webinar once a year. It's pretty popular. And the idea is we get too many spouses who call us and say, my husband passed last month, I don't know what to do. And so, we can have the stuff out there, but unless people pay attention, that's still probably going to happen. But we try to do as much as we can to say, hey, we have resources. Because I can't call DFAS. I can't call Social Security for your spouse. I can just say, here's what you need to do. But it's better if it's coming from you, sitting down and saying, here's where everything is, here's your checklist on who to call. And so we do that once a year, but we're talking about it, it's in the weekly newsletter. If you're getting it weekly, you may only get it monthly. Typically once or twice a year in the magazine, there's some article about this. So that's how we've tried to address the issue.
So if I pay attention to the magazine, that should give me a heads up that you're having a webinar to be able to go do it.
It's hard to do that so I'm writing, when I get back next week, my article for May is due. Okay. February 15th for the May article. So I just turned in one for the April a couple weeks ago. So everything in the magazine has to be done months prior. So we try to drive people to, now a lot of folks, especially older folks, don't like going on the computer, don't want emails. So, we tell people, we do a weekly newsletter. You can tailor that newsletter to say, I only want the legislative issues, or I only want the healthcare issues, or I want the legislative and healthcare issues. And instead of getting it weekly, you can say, I want to get it every other week. I don't want to get bombarded by MOAA emails. You can tailor it to however you want.
And go on that site to sign up for it?
Or call the Member Service Center.
Okay.
800-234-6622. 800-234-MOAA. 6622. The member service reps, typically recent college graduates. There's 7 of them. They may have been military brats. We have one new one who just took over the benefits side, so he's our benefits MSR. He answers non-members or basic members. He was in the Army for 3 years. So our member service reps will do everything they can to find an answer, even if you're a non-member. If you're a premium or life member, they send you back to Lila or myself to answer your questions.
So when was your last webinar, and is it online?
Last webinar was last week, preparing for the tax season. Kurt Sheldon, who's a CFP.
I mean, one related to what he was talking about.
Oh, we did it. We did it in late summer, I believe, and it's on the website. Typically, it takes, so anybody can register for our webinars. We usually do them around 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. We try to avoid Mondays and Fridays. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. people that are still working, we tell them, or say you take your nap at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or don't, or you're out golfing, or that's when you mow the lawn. If you don't want to watch it live, if you register for any of our webinars, if you register within 2 to 4 days after we've completed it, the program that we use is called On24. We'll send you an email with a link to the recording. And then it takes typically 7 to 10 days for our webmaster to post it to our website, which typically if it's not a VA issue, then you have to be a premium or life member to get it. But for those who register, you don't have to be a MOAA member, you get that link, that email with the link, and that's available for 30 days to watch at your leisure. And then if once it's on our website, like the Survivor one is on our website, you have to be a premium or life member, so you have to be able to log in. Anything that I do VA related, and I typically do 2 VA webinars a year, typically early in the year and then in the summer. Those are all for everybody. So any VA webinars that I do, anything associated with VA benefits, it's going to be on our website and anybody can access it. Yes, sir?
I don't know what you can say about it, but our illustrious president brags about the fact that he's reduced Medicare Part D prescription drugs. And at the same time, over the course of the last 3 years, Express Scripts have been going up. So why do we get shortchanged?
I don't know that I can agree that that's what he's done. I don't pay attention to what Medicare Part D costs because we don't need it. We have TRICARE for Life. Yes, that's one of our issues is that TRICARE for Life pharmacy fees. If you don't have access to an MTF pharmacy, that has gone up significantly since the 2017 NDAA. They programmed it all the way out to 26, 27. So every even year it goes up by the next increment, and then is for 2 years. So we haven't seen what's going to come out for 28 and beyond. They haven't programmed those yet, but we know that it should be announced soon. So Medicare Part D premiums 2 years ago, when an Alzheimer's drug was coming out on the market, they increased Part B by greater than COLA because they said this Alzheimer's drug was going to be really, really expensive, and there were going to be a high number of people that needed it. Well, then last year, Medicare Part premiums decreased because the amount of people, the drug cost less than they thought it was going to cost, and there were fewer people who were using it. So they decreased Medicare Part B premiums from 22 to 23. And then this year, a new Alzheimer's drug is coming out that's going to be very expensive. So Part B premiums went up more than COLA this year. So they keep doing this seesaw. So I can't back up President Biden's contention that he brought down drugs because we just track what we're paying for them and are trying to say, hey, let's keep the increases to something reasonable.